Feedback time. So what were some of what was being discussed in the rooms? Or I don't know, how many groups were there? Were there 4?
5.
5. Okay, so maybe we will do like a little round robin-y kind of situation. I don't know who was in group. So I was gonna go, guys, just so that we have some order. So I'm gonna go with group 2 first. Anyone from group 2 is gonna go first. And then we'll go with group 5. And then we'll go with group 4. Oh, actually, scrap that. I don't know what I'm doing. I think we'll just start with group 2, and then if people want to chime in, they'll chime in. I just realized it's a conversation and not a task. My bad, sorry. So anyone can start, but I'm going to pick on group 2 to go because everyone is just quiet. Go group 2. Anyone from group 2.
So I have no idea what my group number was. So maybe that's why no one's talking.
Let's start.
Same, I feel so affirmed.
Yeah. Is it Caesar? Is it Caesar? Okay, are you wanting to start the conversation? Or the feedback?
Not at all. I was just flagging the fact that people might not know their group numbers.
Okay, no stress. Okay, then anyone who is willing to, I don't want to pick on people. Like I generally give a minute, and then if after a minute people are still like, I'm going to pick on somebody, and then someone has to say something. Because there are a lot of voices actually that I haven't heard. Yeah.
Maybe it will help if I tell you who was in group 2. That was Idiot, Jakala, and Taylor. That was group 2.
Okay, so either Edward, Jakala, or who? Taylor.
Jakala.
Okay.
Edward actually made like a whole Word document of all our discussions. But in my short summary, we basically answered the 3 questions and how we understood Ubuntu and how we understood it now. I'm not going to give that summary, but all 3 of us basically agreed with regards to the sticky situations or conversations and how we would guide ourselves with regards to it. That we will start with the intention of just listening to the person and trying to put ourselves in the other person's shoes to understand why he or she might be thinking this way about something, and then start from there to understand, and then dialogue with the conversation regarding that. And then we went on a tangent on what does a safe space entail, what does it mean, and then how do we even create vulnerability within these safe spaces? Because I think the 3rd question was about environment. And then I actually asked, but like, with different groups in my own life, there's a different environment for each group, right? And how would you then bring a total group of people that you don't know, like what would that environment be? And I actually brought the conversation about like, what if you just don't tell them about what the theme might be? Would you get a more organic and raw and honest opinion, or would it be more ambush? Because Chakela would be like, that'll probably be like triggering and stressful, which is true. I mean, obviously it depends on the person or the people and how they react to the question, because it could be an ambush. So that was more or less our discussions.
And what did you decide a safe space would be for you guys? What was there a consensus, or was it ambush versus prepped conversation?
I think we agreed that like you can, like with the Ubuntu dialogues, we all agreed that we knew more or less what we were getting ourselves into, but not specifically what each day might entail, like what questions we would be receiving. So that it gives us the freedom then to go deeper within ourselves and to be open to be able to engage the conversation. But before the time, we knew more or less, okay, this could be the possible space or themes that we need to speak on. So we then again, okay, that will probably be, we need to give some information without it being super directed and enforcing, to give the participants enough time for themselves to decide, just to create the freedom within the space, basically.
Yeah. And I don't know, Edward, you wanted to say something there? Chiming in.
Just to also add exactly to that is the idea of is that once you have framed it in terms of how you approach the conversations, an important thing is also to have the conversation, and it's not a space of it isn't automatically a space of convincing, because something that we were discussing, but I've also noticed for me is when I was thinking of a sticky situation, I was automatically placing myself or thinking of a situation where I was trying to convince someone of what I think is the correct X. So yeah, it was something that we also grappled with in terms of also what's the relationship between openness, but also vulnerability, but also the importance of time and place and atmosphere that we create through that framing when we create a space. So yeah, that's kind of we spend a lot of time on questions there.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm curious because I think if I'm hogging the mic, the other person, whoever wants to speak, please interrupt me. But I'm just gonna go with the thread. In terms of like Ubuntu, what were the guiding? Maybe they were different, and maybe the way you've already talked about, what is a safe space, openness versus vulnerability, and stuff like that. What were some of the Ubuntu? What did you learn about Ubuntu in this space?
Kayla,
Is that for Spark specifically or just like general?
Yeah, general, just general.
I say for me, that like I mentioned it in my group, in my breakup room, that my idea of Ubuntu is very like African rooted community. And then I also obviously knew that, it's not all about kumbaya. And then that was my perspective before joining the dialogues. But now I think it's multidimensional. It's not just one. There's so much layers to understanding Ubuntu, and it's a process. So that's for me how I understand it, or how I've grown from this dialogue, basically.
And part of that multidimensional facet of it, it's about how can you then use that to, it ties in with the earlier point that Taylor was making of how do you understand or place yourself in the shoes of someone else when you're having a dialogue with them? Because part of the problem is, even if you come to a space where you're like, I'm going to treat this person the same way I treat every other person, and we're having a dialogue, but there's a richness and an understanding that is lost if you don't place yourself in the position of that other person in relation to yourself, but also into relation with what you're talking about and everything else. And I think that's where Ubuntu is something that is practically helpful in terms of creating that space, if that makes sense.
It makes sense. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, anyone else from the larger group? Is there anything that anyone said that you're connecting with, or perhaps anything new that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I would like to add something. It was discussed in our earlier meetings. Cizwe said something about the sacrifices that we have to make for Ubuntu, like for our communities, and certain aspects where we have to have this denying of self for the advancement of your community. And that was very profound to me. Also coupled with what Taylor just said and what Anthony said, that it's not a kumbaya, that there comes responsibilities and all this other stuff. So as she just stated, that we need to understand the layers and how dynamic and complex Ubuntu is, and that in a modern context, it should not just be simplified so it's more digestible.
Thank you, Joelle. And did your group have any kind of I'm sure you did, but I know sometimes one topic can be the one that's most discussed. I'm wondering if you discussed anything to do with spaces, sticky situations, and how that which you are now calling Ubuntu, or at least understanding of Ubuntu, how that sort of informed, the other questions.
Yeah, we talked a lot about it, and the majority of our conversation was basically like the logistics of conversations, like how do we go about having them, whether they're formal or informal and things like that. And we also talked about this dialogue, like how do we feel? But I would say that the main focus for me was not allowing more introverted people to be forgotten about and pushed back, and that even in formal settings we shouldn't rely on the person mediating the discussion to navigate or draw attention to. I feel like as dialoguers we can see and we can detect when someone is getting forgotten about or not contributing, because if we allow those people to just sit back in the back burner, we can miss out on something very beneficial to the discussion. So as social people, allowing, how do I say this? Finding ways in which we can navigate the discussion to draw attention to them without attacking them in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Hope that makes sense.
No,
And I said that on the basis that the sticky situations or the uncomfortable settings can be very heavy. And it's not that the person doesn't have something that they want to add, it's that maybe they're just tired, maybe they don't have the capacity to contribute to the discussion. So being more lighthearted or not going straight to the punch, but easing people into the discussion and finding a way and a space where they can be comfortable. And Alex touched on that more, I don't know, I forgot the term that he said, but more aggressive dialoguers that can be more confrontational, that there are certain spaces for certain people. Different people occupy certain spaces. So that was the two main things that I feel that we touched on. And lastly, I said that for the second question, that we need to recognize Ubuntu. We need to recognize the spaces in which community is being built. There's a difference between having a discussion with someone that's challenging your beliefs to attack you versus someone that you're trying to build community with. And you would, for me, I would handle those two different individuals differently. And that sometimes you can just listen without challenging your own beliefs or having to change them if you feel that community is not being built. So that's what we discussed. If my group members would like to add anything that I missed out, I would appreciate that.
Thank you, Joelle. Yes, Anthony, I see your hand.
Okay, I'm taking a leap of faith to see how long this internet connection is going to last, but here I go. So here's the sticky situation. Also, I just want to say, follow Joelle is such it's too much pressure because you said it so eloquently. But I'm going to try my best. Thank you so much. So here's the sticky situation. We found ourselves in a context where we have to appreciate the pain that we are all going through, right? We need to stand flat-footed and understand that we have historical, social, economic, all of that pain to appreciate, right? What that appreciation is going to mean is another question, but we need to know that it's there in the room, right? I was saying to my group members that I'm really not interested in a concept of Ubuntu that just breeds kumbaya. Like, that's not interesting to me because it hasn't gotten us anywhere, and it doesn't get us anywhere. We need to have a very an Ubuntu that understands, an Ubuntu that appreciates pain, an Ubuntu that makes right? So that's the sticky situation. The further sticky situation is we have people that walk into rooms not for themselves, but for their ancestors, for their lineage, for the injustices of the past. They walk into that room cold with a duty, not just on behalf of themselves, but a duty on behalf of all who have stood before them, who have toiled for them, with this burden on their chest to succeed, right? That's another sticky situation. In contrast to people who have had previous privileges that can just walk into situations for themselves. That's another sticky situation, right? And the tension between those situations makes another very sticky, uncomfortable situation that we're not ready to deal with, right? I think what I have just illustrated is just a bunch of, let's say, toffee apple, where it's just like sticky, sticky, sticky. But here's the hope, is that we have similarities that bind us together, right? My hope for Ubuntu is that we can see each other in between all of that, right? We can have spaces where it's not ours to discover the truth, the manifesto of how Ubuntu should be, and to write an excellent dissertation on Ubuntu, but to come to the table with what we do have and have a conversation, right? And I find that conventions where we set out to find the absolute truth behind Ubuntu, they don't fare as well as organic, intimate discussions, right? And I think that's what we're painting out. So yeah, people feel like pressured to come up with the truth. That's just another topic that came up in the group. Also, we had this interesting discussion about preaching to the choir, right? I've never studied music before. So I said, so then Kristen said something along the lines of, we're always in the conversations where we're all preaching to the choir. And then I went ahead and said, look, for me, these conversations of Ubuntu become where we're preaching to the choir, figuring out who's Beyonce, so who can sing the loudest. And Kristen said, it's not about seeing who's Beyonce, it's coming up with a collective uniform sound. That was the most profound thing that I've ever heard. And even if a voice is, let's say, dissonant, we can acclimatize that voice to the harmony of the sound, right? So it's not ours to be Beyonce in the conversation, nor is it ours to foster dissonance and just the effect of hurt. It's ours to create a harmony, a uniform sound. So that choir analogy, it went really far. Yeah, that was one of the conversations that we're having. If you want to add anything, Kristen, if you want to add to this analogy, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
I have never done this on my phone before.
we can hear you though.
Cool. I just want to add one thing is that sometimes in pieces that are composed for choirs.
I think you are breaking up, so maybe turn off your video for now. Maybe let's see if that helps a bit. Is she still there? Oh, she's not there. Well, when she comes back, hopefully I would have finished what I want to say. Quick. What your group discussed is bringing up two things for me. The one, which is what Joelle sort of reflected on around how, really seeing and allowing others to have a voice, and that sometimes, these spaces can sort of like mute the quiet voice or the quieter voice, right? And this sort of, it made me wonder, of course, about the space, whether the space was hopefully not a muting of any voices, hopefully, but spaces tend to do that. But also, I think I was also reflecting around how people also learn differently and communicate differently. Sometimes we trust our words so much that we forget that we have other senses that can also guide the ways in which we can communicate. And immediately when we talked about the analogy of the music, the choir, preaching to the choir, I was like, oh, Kristen is back. I was like, and there enters another form or mode of communicating. I'm speaking because, I'm reflecting on my own practice as an applied theater person. Usually we sort of like try and hone the skills of different ways of communicating, because not everyone is good with the word, but maybe they're good with, like, I don't know, body or music or something. But anyway, I want to get Kirsten to speak before her connection cuts us off again. Go for it, Kirsten.
Okay, thanks. Sorry about that. So the thing about choir singing is that you're not always going to have pleasing harmonies, pleasing to the ear harmonies. The composers, depending on like what era you're dealing with or what the composer's preferences are, you could listen to music that's actually not all that enjoyable to listen to, but it's either been taken on because there's an intellectual component to how it was written, or it's a challenge for the choir to sing. And so that's what I like about the choir analogy, is that it's not always going to be easy music, and it's not always going to sound like what people want to hear. But there's always, in most music, there's always some kind of resolution at the end of a piece. Or it leads to, if there isn't like a harmonic resolution, we call it like a cadence, like a perfect cadence. then there's some kind of almost question mark right at the end. So that's why, every time I say harmony, I'm like, there's a voice in the back of my head that's like, oh, well, there's not always harmony, like that little music theory voice that shouts at me. But even then, when we're not achieving that harmony, there's still intention in the way the choir cooperates and collaborates.
Thank you. Anthony, was that a hand before I comment on this beautiful analogy?
No, Direko, I was just schooled again. So, so I was taking my notes. So
Okay.
the emphasis is on intention there.
Right.
Yeah.
I was going to just extend the analogy, if I may, if it doesn't make sense.
We're going really far, but okay.
It's a good one to work with, guys. But I was thinking, sometimes the choir needs to hear the melody, the non-harmonic sound before it goes out into the world and actually tries to teach the same tune or tries to create a space or different choirs out there, so to speak. So I'm literally just trying to extend this back to us to say we are the choir in a sense, because we are intellectuals in a sense. We have the vocabulary to talk about these things and challenge them and challenge ourselves and blah, blah, blah. And it may feel perhaps that sometimes we are preaching to the choir, but maybe, and I think that was the intention of the whole of the dialogues in essence, was to get to ask us to challenge ourselves. Like, how are we implicated in Ubuntu, right? And what does it mean for us to do it in the spaces that we go out there into the world and do it? It may feel like a choir, sure, but actually it's also a practice run or a little rehearsal to say, okay, guys, how do we do this in real life? Yeah. I don't know. Thank you, Kirsten, for that. And I'm also there. I'm taking the notes with the choir. Anyone else would like to share? How are we doing for time?
We have about 5 minutes to 1:30.
Okay, so we have, I'm going to take maybe one more, just so we can wrap it up on time, because I don't want to keep anyone over time. Is there anyone else who connected, has something to say, perhaps, about the exercise in the breakout rooms? Would like to say anything?
Well, since we're here.
Yes.
So our group was quite unhappy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I was hoping that they would speak. I think in answer to the question of what have we learned, there was some frustration expressed. And I think the phrasing that was used was, it's almost like we keep on talking about how to breathe. So that was an interesting one. I think it was Tabani who was like, let's just do it. Just finding oneself in this constant space of ideation. And then I think in the two following questions as well, there was just quite a lot of frustration. Certainly for my part, I was just like, I am frustrated at the feeling of, I genuinely do not believe this. The attribution of Ubuntu with the space that does not hurt feelings. Or I'm like, rubbish. If it's going to heal anything, it must hurt a lot of the time. And talking about how we have this phrasing that you do not throw away people. There's no rubbish bin for people. So you stick in one room and sometimes you make each other bleed. And if you're not willing to do that, then we are going to talk ad nauseum and nothing is going to change. And that was generally almost I don't know, I felt like we were rather the non-believers in the course. We kind of
I don't like that we only have 5 minutes. I'm so, and I see a lot of hands coming up. But we do have 15 minutes of extra time that by the way, Pearl so kindly reminded us that we keep forgetting to open the space up after each session to have these more extended conversations for those who'd like to stay behind and have this conversation. I just want to say it now, because now I'm like, ooh, what are you saying, Caesar? Yes, I'm actually excited that you are bringing in a different flavor. In fact, when you were in the breakout rooms, we were discussing, or at least I brought up, I was reminded by the same thing about disrupting, or what you say. You said it well. I'm not even going to try and say it. I see hands, and also I cut you, Caesar. Are you done? You done saying what you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to just say quickly, just at the end, yeah. And Pearl just talking about just dialogue fatigue, but just where she's at, because we keep going around and around in circles, but things are not changing. And I was just reminded, just one quick point, in the TI, whatever, those talks that they had just before we came with Desmond Tutu, before we came into Freedom, TRC.
Yeah.
There was a lady there, I forget her name, but she got up at one point and just wailed. She wailed and she wailed because it wasn't enough to just talk and to shut her down and all everybody did, in the end, the bishop started singing that song, Senze Nina. And I'm like, until we have spaces like that where people can wail without us running away because it hurts or it's uncomfortable. Suka, we're playing.
I think that I think it was Nomonde Kalata. Yeah. Caesar, thank you so much for bringing this up. I want to acknowledge the hands that are raised. But I need to ask, what's the time?
17:30.
It is 12:30. So this marks the end of the dialogues. But I really want to continue because we have 15 minutes grace. So for those who would like to exit, you're more than welcome because we've come to the end of our time. But I do want us to open the space up still for another 15 minutes. Okay,
Don't exit immediately, because before you leave, Upenyu just wanted to say something. So don't just leave. If you want to leave, tell us, but we have 15 more minutes for people who want to stay behind.
Okay, I'm also being careful not to dilute this moment.
No, exactly. I just wanted to say.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Should we continue? Should we go? Or should Opinion say what he needs to say and then we continue?
Well, let's continue until people start to.
Because I'm just conscious that people might actually want to leave and then Opinion. Maybe Opinion, please say what you, and then we will continue this discussion after Opinion has given the,
I'm sorry for having to come in to disrupt the flow of the conversation, but I also wanted to emphasize that the feedback that you provide us is very, very important for thinking about future dialogue sessions. It could be for next week, it could be other dialogue sessions coming up. So we would like to invite you. We put the feedback form link in the chat box. I can post it again right now. Please, if you have to leave right now, I would like to ask that you complete that before you leave. Or if you have to leave before you do, at the moment you find time, please do complete that. And we are shooting to have everyone give us feedback so that we can plan on what we can do better next time. Really appreciating your feedback, both is very, very valuable. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pinyo. Thank you. And next week we will be having our official debrief and reflection as well. So we're looking forward to seeing all of you back just for that session. Ruby and myself will be facilitating it. And that's it with the announcements. We can continue. Right?
I don't want to butt in, but I'm very interested in, Tabani was in Sizwe's group and she mentioned his name and he had his hand up and I would love to hear.
So the names, the hands that are up now is Anthony, Kirsten, and Mariki just noted Tabani as a member of the group was up. Yeah. Okay, cool. So who would like to go first? Who would like to go first?
Mariki, I lowered my hand. Sorry there. I lowered my hand because I just wanted to mention that fact of dialogue fatigue, right? Just this idea of, when they'd said, what other spaces would you like to create? My gut feeling was that I don't want to create more spaces where we talk. Let's just shut up and let's just do shit. Let's not talk about it. Let's not break it down. Let's not unpack it. Let's not flesh it out. Let's just do it. And you know, there was Pearl really encapsulated that frustration too. We have these dialogues, then on the other end of the dialogues, you come back to your world and you realize that nothing's changed. We were just in a room filled with, you know, people that spoke eloquently and spoke about, you know, these wonderful ideas that we all espouse towards. But then you walk into society, it's the same. You're also the same. And perhaps even when you step into the dialogues, you know what the right things to say are to either keep the conversation going to fit or to fit in. You know what the right notes are. You sort of, the music analogy again, you have your part, right? You know what your notes are. You know what you should sing, whether you're a lower register or a higher register. And you don't want to be out of the choir. You don't want to be pointed out as a person, you know? And so the frustration is in that the talking and talking and talking and unpacking often becomes, initially, perhaps we want to take the gloves off and hurt each other, right? And just punch whatever needs to be punched and bleed wherever bleeding needs to happen, so that the pus comes out at the end, right? All the infections come out. But eventually you sort of meander into this, let's put the gloves on and let's just, you know, say the right things and hit the right notes, and we'll walk away saying we've did it again, you know, fun times. On the other end of the dialogues, nothing changes. So the frustration was just tired of talking. Let's just fucking do it.
Thank you, Taban. Kirsten or Anthony?
If I may speak briefly, I have to leave in a minute.
Sure.
So I just want to quickly add, because I've got something else to add to this analogy now that it's growing. It's like we're all stuck in rehearsals, or we're all stuck in the analysis phase where everyone's been given their music and we're all just sitting there playing the notes on our own, and then we come into rehearsal, but no one's actually going out there and performing. But anyway, I just thought I'd add that. Sizwe's conversation about pain is something that came up in my group's dialogue or conversation about this idea of like people sometimes act out of pain, and that causes friction or animosity. Sometimes people target other people's pain to achieve their own, and then Anthony pointed to pain being a means to an end. But then Sizwe added a third dimension to this idea of pain, and the idea that we almost have to, you know, clean the wound. We have to, what is it called? Like you rinse the wound with alcohol or whatever, like, and this idea that, you know, you trigger pain for whatever reason, but actually to a large extent we have to clean the wound. We have to make sure that we can stop it from hurting in the future, even though it hurts now. But I think it all has to do with your intention. Why are we triggering this pain again? Is it for selfish gains, or is it actually to help build further? I have to go, but thank you. This has been a great dialogue.
Sure. Yeah. No, thank you so much for your contribution. Anthony.
I do want to say, Sizwe and Tabani, y'all really went there, okay? You really went the eye of the storm of this whole inquiry, right? There is a luxury to academia where we get to pontificate and fantasize and theoreticize struggle, right? And most of the times it's not our own, or we distance ourselves from that struggle, right? There's a luxury to using beautiful English words that mesmerize you in the conversation, so as to appeal to the fact that I'm actually in pain, I'm hurting, and I want to well, but I also want to keep you in the room, right? And I also want to see where this is going. My fear is, though, we have people who come into this space knowing that they wield pain, knowing that it has served them to a large extent. They wield pain like a sword. And as they're wielding that pain, and as they're hearing our yearns, and as they're hearing our wailing, and as they're hearing the wailing, it gives them a sense of gratification because they know they're in a position of power, right? I just don't know how long I can perform my dissertation of pain for everybody to see on a daily basis and show you the true four corners of my pain and watch you just sit there, right? So just like I'm moved, just like I'm walking through life anxious, knowing that I'm different, knowing that I don't fit in, knowing that I don't have this privilege, knowing that I have a yoke, that I'm not equally yoked. I don't know what you're going to, I don't know if you're going to hold me when I show you that pain. And we don't know if we're going to be held collectively by the people who are in power, who have the seat at the table, once we show you the true four corners of our pain. So this was the discussion that we had in our group. I find it much more comfortable using that word quite intentionally to exercise and write you a dissertation on what pain is so that I don't have to deal with my own. There's a comfort in that. And there's a comfort in intellectuals doing that. And I strongly believe that's why most of us do that. So I just want to put that on the table.
Thank you, Anthony. I see there's a hand.
Jonah.
Jonah.
Jonathan.
Jonathan, okay. Cool. Thank you, Anthony.
And Samira.
And Samira. So we have Jonathan and Samira coming up.
I can give it over to Samira because she had the hand above before me.
Okay.
That would be great if possible. Thanks, Jonathan. I have another class to get to at 6, so I'll be very brief. Yeah, I definitely resonated a lot with this whole issue of just talking about things. And I think that's something I mentioned in a previous session. I can't remember what the context was, but one of the things that also brought me here was really, I suppose, my expectation was kind of looking for practical outputs, I suppose, if I can put it like that. So really concrete type of things that I could take away from this. And I've had this struggle a lot in terms of being in the academic setting and having all these conversations. And this is what I mentioned before, where I'm just also tired of, talking about other people's problems, being, as Anthony said, very far removed from them. And often without those who we are speaking about, those who are actually affected, being involved in the conversation, because we're just completely ignoring their narratives, their needs, their voice. And that links back to, I think, the TRC, which we brought up a bit in our breakout room today, this idea that our negotiations to a democratic South Africa largely was between the white elites and the black elites. And, a lot of our country was not actually recognized in those negotiations. Their voices were again unrepresented. And I think linked to this as well, just the idea of dialoguing and these spaces also come with this idea of certain forms of articulation. So certain things are acceptable, certain things are not. Also language and privileging of language. So English, of course, is one of the big things. And then apart from that, this idea of accents and, this perceived, notion of, oh, you're uneducated if you speak a certain way, not, recognizing the fact that this is not people's first, second, or even third languages. And then also this idea of privileging rationality over things like emotion, which I think was also touched on, and objectivity as opposed to subjective experiences and things like that. So those are just things that popped into my head. And then on a very last point, I think this idea of, as much as also it's tiring to have these conversations, and I completely agree, Delisha brought this up when I'd mentioned this exact point of, I'm tired of having conversations and not doing anything about it. It is really important to still have these informal conversations, not just here, but also I think I really love the homework, if I put inverted commas, so taking it to our friends, taking it to our families and opening up these spaces. So at least that was a bit more of a follow through for me, because that kind of, she put it really nicely, kind of lays the fertile ground for hopefully change. And I think, I'm going to stop there. I wanted to say something about this whole idea linked to language and invented versus invited spaces and those type of logistics, but I will stop there for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Samira. Thank you. Jonathan.
I guess coming from the American perspective, I think I can definitely see some people may want to take more practical things, but I think I found it rewarding to hear at least perspectives across the Atlantic, hearing about like, you know, like how people are like the specific issues that are going on in South Africa and stuff like that. And I found that really particularly like really like insightful. But I think you know, just to keep this short, maybe something for the future, you know, like I think a lot of value could be done in sort of like seeing, yeah, like focusing on the practical, but having people engage different ideas of how to tackle on certain issues and do a lot of like theory building, you know. I think from that in like and I think, you know, this space like has like a lot of potential, you know, like bringing, you know, like South African students, American students, you know, a lot of like as like a means of like, you know, doing some theory building on like praxis, you know, like I think that a lot of like, you know, and like at least some conscious raising too, you know, like it's sort of like reorienting our like understandings of our own issues to a larger global context. I think a lot of good can be done in this space. Like, and I like, well, yeah, I can recognize a lot of the issues that some of these previous people spoken about. I think where we could grow is just start like, I think the focus instead of just talking about the issues, how should we focus on doing practical stuff? So that's what I'd say.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm not even sure who, okay, there's a lot more people. Sorry, I'm only seeing like 5 people on the screen, in fact 4. But I think what you're all touching on is kind of like the objective of what we felt was necessary for the dialogues this year specifically was what would happen if we placed the academic, the dialoguer in a position of being reflexive, right? And I'm really excited, still very genuinely, that this is coming up now. But also I'm not excited because it's the last dialogue or the last one of the last, you know, more formal conversations. But what you are all touching on is this idea of action. What now? And these are we've only had 4 weeks together. And I think a lot of the in our experiences, we would have very intellectual conversations and we would go and, you know, nothing really changes. And that was the frustration, I think, on both sides, facilitators and participants. And what Caesar's group is bringing up, and of course everyone else is chiming in now, is yeah, there's frustration. I do think there's space for dialogue. Echoing from the conversation around with Anthony's group around how people communicate. I really think that there are spaces, or we do need to think about how we accommodate different modes of communicating. Dialogue is one of them, and it has a space. And what you're talking about, Jonathan, around theory building, this is maybe that space for theory building. And now it's on you to now go out there and play the music and create your own choirs, so to speak. Yeah, that's all I have to say for now. But that's the challenge. I think that's the challenge, like a real challenge for you guys. And I'm so glad that it came up. Basically, that's all I'm saying for now. Anyone else want to say anything?
And it would be interesting next week in reflection if they could talk about that more. You know, what now?
Yeah.
I was also going to say quite briefly that in my own thoughts of how to incorporate this into the relationships I have with friends and families, that I think that would be my goal, is like, what sticky situations do I want to bring to what groups of people that I appreciate and would like to foster this practice of Ubuntu in. And I think it's simply asking them the question of, what is the importance of conversation to you? Like, do you see conversation beyond banter every day, or just, hi, how are you? What's going on in your life? I think being able to stretch their understanding of how important conversation is, because we use it in every form of work, play, live, celebration. I think that's the what now. That's the how do I apply this to my life? Because I think when you become Loreco and Mariki, like how to be a facilitator, now we have to disciple that into our next relationships, the relationships we've yet to build, and just continue to stretch others as we were stretched here for these 4 weeks in these conversations. It's just now saying, how can I get other people to understand that I value their conversation more than they think? I value everything everyone said here more than they know. I've written down their quotes with their names because I think it's so important that they said that it came out of their mouth and that they feel that way.
from their own experiences, because it's deeper than repeating something for it to sound good. It's reflecting how they feel, and I should be receptive of that and aware of it.
Thank you, Lily. Yeah. Yeah. I wish I could see.
Avoid being like punctual, like, you know, saying something so awesome and then it's like, now what? It's just like, also I'm learning how to engage other people in following up with things that I say outside of the space and whatnot, and just to listen rather than to reply, but to understand and to engage them in what they think.
Mm. 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 I'm sitting with a comment which might go not sideways, but just like go off on a tangent, but I'm going to bring it in because I feel like I may have I don't know if I articulated it the way I had wanted to articulate it initially, but I'm really just sitting with this notion of communicating differently. This is the artist in me talking now. I'm really sitting with, you know, what does it mean for all of you in your various fields? You know, how do we speak in ways that the people that we talk to can express? I'm just sitting with that. I think that's my biggest learning right now, or my biggest learning moment for me that came up today. But yeah, I'm going to allow this moment of silence, not because I have anything to say or nothing to say rather, but just because, yeah, it's your space.
Can you repeat the question?
My question that I'm asking myself.
Oh, yourself. Oh, I'm so sorry. I was trying
my bad. Yeah, no, sorry. No, I was asking myself. I think what came up for me is how we can facilitate different modes or different ways of communicating other than just verbal English talking. Yeah. I was reflecting, yeah, from my own training point, I guess, like as an artist or a theater person. Another question which I want to ask is in relation to the idea of frustration. I don't know if I should ask it, I'm going to ask it. I hope we can conclude quickly. But I'm curious to know whether this space was this Zoom space. Mariki, please ring me in if I'm going too far. Whether this space was frustrating. I think maybe I'm asking, I don't know if the group that brought the emotion of frustration is still here. I can't see on the screen. Are they?
Yes,
okay.
we are.
Yes. So was the frustration partly a reflection of this space, or was it also just partly the process of dialoguing is what's frustrating around the issues that we have to grapple with? I don't know if I asked that, if that makes sense.
All right, Jericho, I'll go. Well,
go. Yeah.
Both.
I'll go. For me, it's the frustration really comes from just dialogue fatigue, to be quite honest, and I think just because I've been a part of a lot of dialogues and webinars because of my academics, so it's really created the fatigue way, and it just feels like we're talking and nothing is happening. So when I came into, so that also transfigured also within the Ubuntu dialogues. I think I was mentioning to Tabani and Sizwe that, for example, today I felt very, very depleted when I thought about Ubuntu dialogues for some reason, because there was just that feeling of, I was like trying to think back as to what we've been talking about and everything else. And it got to a point where I started asking myself, what exactly is supposed to come out of this? And I couldn't think of an answer. And just because of that just made me it made me feel very helpless. And to think like, what is the point of these dialogues anyway? So that was something that actually, triggered most of that. And just to also mention something that it's also interesting what you said, Jericho, just to go back to what you said about how, as facilitators also, you guys have also been feeling kind of the same way, in the sense of what more can we do? Does it end here? what more is there that we can do? So that just resonated with me right there when you mentioned. And also the feeling of red tape, in the sense of thinking about spaces that we can actually create, because it got me into thinking, if these spaces are within an academic setting, there's so much red tape around it. How do we go around it? You know, how do we go around it and create spaces wherein we could talk and there is discomfort, even if we're not trying, even if we're not like trying for it to happen, but there will be scratching because we're trying to heal. Ethics, how do we go about that within ethics? So those are just kind of the things that have been resonating in my head. Yeah.
Do the spaces that you need, not need to, but do they have to be academic spaces? Can they be, unless if that's the space that you'd actually want to create? If it's an academic space, I can understand the red taping, but I'm also curious about other spaces in communities, either your own or outside.
Yeah, my own spaces also have a lot of red tape. So for me, that's why I mentioned that there's a lot of red tape also around me, even the spaces that I work within, not just in academia. I work for the South African Police. There's a lot of red tape happening there. So much red tape basically in most of the work that I do, which also is also rooted within Ubuntu also. But there's just so much red tape. It's like, how do you break out of it? How do you go around it?